in the studio right now, as promised, we have some very, very phenomenal guests with us in the moment. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Get the listeners knowing who we are.
I'm John Mackey. I'm a composer.
I'm Julian Bliss, clarinetist.
And I'm Abdo Time Jardine Zomenyo. I'm a current UIC student, clarinetist, and composer.
And I am, as far as you guys know, as you've been listening, I'm Julia Soulsby, and I'm really excited to be conducting an interview with these awesome people in the room with me today. We're here on the event of John Mackey's Clarinet Concerto.
Yes.
Performed by Julian Bliss.
Yes.
Why don't we talk about, just to get it started, like artistic process? Like, what was the idea here?
So the idea, it was not my idea. I also didn't want to write a clarinet concerto.
Sure.
No offense to Julian or anyone else who loves the clarinet.
Yeah.
But my teacher in grad school had written a clarinet concerto that I just worshipped, and so it was very intimidating to try to do something as well.
Sure.
But eventually, when Julian asked, Julian is a big deal on clarinet,
to say the least.
Yeah. So when he asked me, I thought, well, maybe I should try to do this. And so I actually talked about it with my wife, who titles all my pieces, and she helps with, just general concepts of pieces a lot of time. And she had the idea for the piece, which basically what happened is we were seeing the ballet Swan Lake in San Francisco, where I live, and I was very bored, and I was reading the program note, basically the synopsis of the ballet. I was just reading it over and over again because I was so bored. And then during one of the intermissions, I was talking to her about the program note or the synopsis of the ballet. And I didn't know what to do with the clarinet concerto, and she had the idea that she would write a synopsis for a non-existent ballet, and then I would write the music to sound like that, but it would be a clarinet concerto.
Okay.
So she wrote the story out, and then I set her story to music, and that became the clarinet concerto. So that's a sort of unusual process, even for me. But I've done that before, where I sort of collaborate with her. She comes up with a big concept, and she's not a musician, so she's not invested in what it sounds like. She just has an idea, and then I write something that sounds like her idea. And to me, making any kind of art, the hardest thing is figuring out why you want to do it and what is it. So she does the hardest part. She tells me what it is, and then I just do the easy part, which is the notes.
Right.
So, and I can write whatever I want, and then Julian has to play it.
Julie has to play it. Yeah. That's a really interesting process. I appreciate the fact that you had your wife come up with the hard part.
Yeah,
the
totally. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, understood.
I have terrible ideas. I had a piece played a couple weeks ago that I wrote when I was 18, and I have I think decent titles now because my wife titles everything.
She does them.
Yeah. So on that concert there were pieces called "Places We Can No Longer Go," "A Deep Reverberation Fills with Stars," and "Mom's Song." And you can probably guess which one I titled. So that's the difference. That's where we would be if it weren't for her. So
cool. That's a very cool process. Yeah. I'm just curious, in terms of getting this thing to come together and to create this piece of art between the two of you, were there any differences in creative process and interpretation? Did you guys have different ideas, and were there any discontinuations?
No, I mean, where we've seen differences so far is when other people have played it.
Sure.
For me, because I wrote it for and with Julian.
Right.
So there were very few things that I wrote that he asked me to change. In the few cases that he did, he was right. There were just artistic decisions that I had made that I tried and I wasn't sure about. And in those cases, he would say, "I don't know," and he was right. So
okay.
But it was beyond that. I would send it to him, and he would record himself playing it for me. And I would send him things asking how hard it was, and he would literally send me a video. Well, first I would send him something, and I would say, "Is this hard?" And he would say, "I'm at the pub, but in give me 10 minutes to get home, and I will check." And then 10 minutes later, he would send me a video.
That's awesome.
Of him just shredding it, and then
just on call clarinet.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it was really, really cool and a great luxury to be able to write something and not be totally sure how it would work or what it would really sound like on the instrument, because I can't play clarinet.
Right.
And send it to him, and he would send it back to me. So that was a fun part of the process, and that's also unusual for me to be able to kind of workshop it while I write it. So the difference I find artistically has just been when other people play it, because it wasn't created for those people.
Sure.
So then there's a little bit of me really just trying to get most people to sound like Julian, honestly.
Right. Which is probably not an easy task to fill.
Well, they don't like it then they can't do it.
Right,
So
right.
there are two problems there. So,
Right.
yeah.
That completely makes sense. Kind of straying off of this a little bit, just because I'm curious, between the two of you, separate answers, of course, but what kind of music do you listen to just regularly outside of what you play?
Personally, I listen to quite a wide variety of music. Of course, classical music and these days a huge amount of jazz.
Right.
But yeah, I mean everything then from old school R&B, soul, funk, a lot of that actually, all the way through old school rock and roll and even some heavy metal, and pretty much everything in between. If it's good music, then I can certainly appreciate it. But yeah, those seem to be well, it's kind of every genre then that I tend to listen to, and it sort of depends on my mood. But
What about if you're like in the car?
Yeah, driving to work, driving to the gig.
driving to a concert, well, again, it depends. Often driving home from a concert, that'll be sometimes the heavy metal to keep me awake.
Right.
We also have there's a I think it's mainly limited to the UK, an electronic music called drum and bass, which there's a lot of my youth actually spent listening to that kind of music. So that's very high energy. That kind of gets me going. But yeah, I mean, or it could be Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, Second Movement. If I want.
Totally.
Or sometimes, actually, I like driving in complete silence. Often
Underrated
if you've heard,
sometimes,
it
yeah.
really is. If you've heard a lot of music, sometimes just
like
nothing.
completely nothing going on up
It's-
there.
it's-
Just a
Oh,
mental
I don't-
break. It's
I don't-
awesome.
I disagree.
Really?
Unless I'm writing if I'm writing a piece, I don't want anything
Right.
on it.
That makes
But
sense.
this morning in my Uber, for example, he didn't have any music on.
Sometimes that
And
can
then
get
it was
awkward.
just awkward because
Yeah.
then we're just sitting in this car together
yeah.
saying nothing, and I'm like,
Like car
this
noises.
is yeah, exactly.
see,
Yeah,
see,
that-
as
The
a-
music
like
of
that.
car noises.
As a British person, that's fine for me.
Just, I'm not
The
going
British
to speak to
in
this
you.
person. I'm
We
just going to
we
ignore
don't
them.
talk to strangers.
yeah.
That's a very English thing, though. I feel.
yeah.
Yeah, I listen to I mean similar. I listen to a lot of different stuff. People recommend things to me, and that's fun to discover new things.
Yeah.
Like I recently discovered this. He's a singer, songwriter, violinist named Kishi Bashi, who someone told me about him, and I was telling people, I just started listening to Kishi Bashi, and they're like, yeah, welcome to like 2010 hipster, like
2010 hipster.
yeah. So I'm like, well, it's still good. So I actually listen to a lot of K-pop.
Okay.
It's just so different than what I write. So
Right, yeah.
that is a way for me to like listen to very upbeat music. There's no sad K-pop that I've
True.
ever found. So and it's great exercising music, like running music and stuff.
Just high energy
Yeah, it's
stuff.
very like super catchy, incredibly well produced.
Sure.
Just the engineering and everything on the K-pop stuff is astonishing. So that's fun to listen to. Just as I don't do that, but
Right.
what's being done currently in other countries even. So yeah, and I love, my favorite band is the progressive metal band Tool. So like I love Tool. I've seen them a couple times at
Tool's
concert.
pretty cool.
But like I also, in the same week or a couple months ago, I saw Harry Styles live and Lizzo live in the same week. It was a
okay.
really good week.
Yeah.
Like, and those are just incredible. Like
Right.
both those albums are spectacular, great writing, amazing production and engineering. They just sound
Oh, yeah.
so good. And
There's
so,
definitely something to say about the production. That's
100%.
major upgrade for the past 10 years. Or
Yeah,
even, like,
yeah, it's
huge
really
upgrade.
super impressive. So that kind of stuff I like. I like it because it's catchy, but it's also just a thing to kind of learn what is being done in production and stuff. like
Totally.
things I don't normally
Yeah.
do in concert music, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah. I'm always really interested to see like what other people like in the world of classical music or instrumental music, people tend to put us in this box of only listening to what we play. And most of the time I found that nobody really listens to only what they play. And I was kind of having this conversation with a couple friends earlier, just, as somebody who makes that kind of music, you are told that you only make that kind of music, which is one of the most annoying things in the world, in my opinion. And I'm sure you guys have had your experiences
Well, I
with
mean,
that.
I think with Julian, it's cool because he does classical and jazz.
Sure,
And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
sort of unusual, and just
Yeah, I think there's certainly maybe a stigma with classical music that's. I mean, yes, of course we live it, we breathe it, but I mean, can you really consider yourself a well-rounded musician if that's all you listen to?
Right.
Considering classical music and any genre of music has taken so much inspiration from other types of music, which all sort of comes from the same thing.
Right.
If you really distill it down. So, yeah, I think to be honest, I think it's quite close-minded to think or to say, no, I can only or will only listen to classical music because that's all I play. And then, I mean, the simplest, where do you then draw the line between jazz and classical?
Right, and that's a whole other conversation.
I know,
like
so I'm
everyone's
getting on my high horse.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. There's lots of people have differing opinions on that, which is also something to say. But yeah, it definitely is very, very limiting.
There's a brilliant woman who passed away a few years ago named Mary Rogers, who was the daughter of Richard Rogers, the composer of like Oklahoma and all that stuff. And she wrote a musical called Once Upon a Mattress that I was in high school. And she's just brilliant. And she used to work for Bernstein when he was doing the radio and TV shows back in like the 60s. And he asked her to come up with some way to describe classical music that wasn't classical music.
Right.
Because he's like, kids don't know what that even means. And so what she came up with is exact music, which I think is really good. Like the idea that what you see on the page is what is probably going to happen, whereas other kinds of music are not necessarily that. So that's what makes classical music different, is just that it's exact music. It is, in theory, pretty close. Like, those are the same notes every time someone plays it. If they
do it right.
If they do it right, yeah. And I like that term.
Yeah.
It also sounds less snooty.
Yeah, classical definitely has like a little bit of a stigma to it.
Yeah. Like when people ask me what kind of music I write, I don't want to say classical, because then I'm like, oh, like Mozart?
Like,
no,
not one bit.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No. Like Mozart with a lot of drums?
Yeah.
Not closer. That's closer, but still not it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. So.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of really interesting things to be said there about, genre.
yeah, and just labels like that are
Labels.
restrictive, and like Julian was just saying, like it's kind of. I get why we need that. Like K-pop is only K-pop, but
Right.
Sure, but
yeah, totally. Just another curiosity question. If you guys weren't doing what you do now, like if you weren't a composer and you weren't a clarinetist, outside of music, what would you be doing?
like as a job,
Just
if I
like-
had just not done this as my job.
Or not even job, just what would the dream be if it weren't music?
Oh, I don't think I would pick anything different, but if I couldn't have done this, I think I would have wanted to be an actor. Like in high school, I wanted to be an actor. Like,
Yeah,
I
the stage
was like,
stuff.
I was like president of drama club until I got
Ooh.
impeached, which is a whole.
Impeached?
Yeah,
I would love to hear that story,
Yes,
actually.
it is possible to get impeached from a presidency. So,
Wow.
if you are president of your high school drama club.
Wow.
So, but I thought that was what I wanted to do. Like, I just
Sure.
love being on stage, and it was just very fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started writing. I'd been writing music since I was like 11, but I didn't know if I was any good at it. And then I decided, fall of my senior year of high school, that maybe I'll just do music. And the rationale, which was dumb, was I knew a lot about like famously out of work actors, but I didn't know any out of work composers. So I thought they must just all be working
all
like
working.
crazy. Yeah, but no, that's not how it works.
Turns
Yeah. So that was not the best reason to pick being a composer. It was like, but better job options.
Better
But,
job,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I would.
Rude awakening.
I probably would have tried to be an actor
Huh.
and failed, but that's what I would have tried to do.
Yeah.
It's a difficult. I'm sitting here trying to think while you're speaking.
Well, because Julian's been doing this since he was like 6 or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Lots of
like,
musicians
long
start
time.
really young.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't pick anything else. I
Right.
love what I do and the variety it brings, and seeing the world and travel. I feel very lucky. I guess if that wasn't ever an option, a lot of my family are in engineering and motorsport, so probably something in that. But then
motorsports.
Yeah,
I
motorsport?
love motorsport.
Interesting.
Yes, yeah. So
And his brother is also like a famous Instagram.
he
Like,
is now. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
An influencer?
he has become that. He's a writer first and foremost, but then started making short videos that then went on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and it went completely viral. And
Really?
So yeah, he ends up being very well known, spotted everywhere, anywhere I'm ever with, anywhere we go together. He's always spotted and asked for selfies and stuff, which is pretty
But not
cool.
the Julian Bliss.
Well, I know. I'm very proud of him, very happy for him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess something in that, or something completely ridiculous like an astronaut. That would kind of
Yeah.
you know, why not? If you had to pick.
Right.
Yeah, if you had to choose
you
anything,
could do
why
anything,
not do
yeah.
like
That's too dangerous.
the most outlandish thing that you could possibly think of? Why not? You know,
Yeah, why not?
we've got one life. You may as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly.
Astronaut. Wow.
Yeah.
To me, that just sounds like you're probably gonna die. It just sounds like
the idea of space is horrifying.
You
At
know,
some point,
it
I
just
guess.
seems very dangerous. It's like, you know, if you are a rich person and your hobby is flying your own plane, I know how you're going to die. Like,
Right.
it's obvious to me.
Right.
I just know right now. So
In the air.
Yes, yeah, or
Suspended
not
in
in
the
the
air.
air, not
Or
in the air
not-
anymore.
not
Yeah,
anymore.
not in
no
the
longer
air.
in the air.
Right.
Well,
Totally.
well, that took a turn.
It took a turn. Yeah. Well, I am aware that you were the first person to be admitted to Juilliard without having played an instrument. What was that like?
I don't know if I was the first, but it's weird. I don't know anyone else
Right.
that has gotten in without being able to play an instrument into the, you know, the music department.
Sure.
It was fine for me because I just, you know, they if I had a primary instrument, they wouldn't want me to play it because I
Right.
wouldn't be as good as the other students who actually really play that instrument. Like if I showed up like I can play flute, they would be like, we don't care.
Yeah,
we have
we're here to
real
write.
we
Yeah.
have real flutists here.
Sure.
We're not putting you in the orchestra. So, so I always thought it was just kind of silly because I am obviously biased because I never learned to play an instrument. I think it's silly to expect composers to be able to play something in the day of technology where the
Totally, like
software will
MIDI
do
is
everything. Yeah,
crazy now.
I have really, really good MIDI setups. And, you know, when I started writing, I had terrible playback. Like 8-bit computers is what I used when I was a
Sure.
little kid.
Which I'm sure had really interesting sound effects.
Yeah,
itself.
the sounds are, you know, these sounds are like cool and retro. Like
Yeah,
now people
yeah,
use them
retro.
like non-ironically in
Yeah.
pop music. You'll hear those sounds.
Yeah.
But that's what I, you know, learned to write with, and then I just got better and better software. So I don't need to be able to play anything. It'd be convenient if I could play piano or something. If I could sit at the piano, I am jealous of composers who can sit at the piano and just play.
Just write
Yeah,
and
exactly. Just
play,
like comes
yeah.
out of their fingers, and now there's music. I think that's cheating. I think that's not.
Yeah,
it's not even
it's
fair.
not fair.
Yeah. So so yeah, Juilliard it was a non-issue because no one, you know, everyone else played an instrument, but they didn't while they were
Right.
there for the most part. You're just there to write. So it was fine.
Yeah. Interesting. That is an interesting process. I mean, I didn't even know, like, until recently that they accepted people without having played instruments. I just assumed, like, that they were all instrumentalists.
It's actually an issue when I was applying for colleges in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
when I was, you know, looking at undergrad schools, it was hard to find one that didn't require me to play an instrument.
Sure.
You need to be proficient on some instrument for some
Which is
reason.
interesting. If you're, like, going for composition,
Right.
you should, like, be able to show composition chops rather than, like, playing chops.
Right, like I couldn't have gone to like, you know, the Eastman Conservatory,
Mm-hmm.
for example. I don't know that I would have gotten in anyway, but I couldn't have even applied because
Sure.
I can't play an instrument. So for most schools that are music schools, you have to be able to play something to get into the school, and then you kind of get into the composition studio. But I only applied to 2 schools for undergrad, and both of which were in Ohio, where I was from, and neither of which needed me to play an instrument. So that was basically how I picked where I auditioned for undergrad, and then with grad school, it wasn't an issue at all.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And
to
I
hear
bet
about
it's-
these.
I would think that it's probably less and less common. I would hope that schools are being less strict about that with composers because of
Yeah.
what you can do with the software now.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so.
Like I wish it'd
this
be
day and age.
it'd be cool if I could have played in an ensemble and gotten
Sure.
ensemble experience. I would have loved that, but you know, I didn't, and it's fine. So
Yeah. Did you have lots of ensemble experiences, like, growing up?
A decent amount. I mean, I always knew from as long as I can remember that I wanted to be a soloist. That was
Always
my
the
main,
dream, yeah.
Always my main focus. But of course, playing in ensembles is incredibly, well, it's fun and very rewarding. And so, yeah, when I went to junior college, Royal College of Music in London, and every Saturday they had this day for if you're too young to go, as the name might suggest. And so, yeah, I played a wind ensemble there and a clarinet choir, which was great fun. And also when I was at IU, Indiana University, was in wind ensemble there, which was also very enjoyable. And these
very
days,
young. Like you were in wind ensemble when you were like 12 at Indiana, right?
it
So-
was
That's
a while
crazy.
ago now. It was a long time. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, even now, where I don't play in a large ensemble, I have done some projects in orchestra, which is great fun. and I do play with groups. I have my own groups, but I guess the maximum size is about 12 or 13 musicians, so it's more chamber music at that point. But no, I do enjoy playing in large groups, even though my main love and focus is as a soloist.
Yeah, totally. What's it like standing in front of the band playing?
That's great.
Yeah.
I guess, well, it's not for everyone.
Sure.
And I've just always really, really enjoyed it. Whether it's with a piano, with a string quartet, I think there's a slightly different way of playing and of expression that you can afford yourself as a soloist that you can't really as a section player. And I think I've always felt more comfortable with that expression, or being able to, I wouldn't say necessarily it's more expression, it's just different you
expression,
can't,
for sure.
You can't think of it. It sounds a bit selfish. You can't think about yourself in a section. You have to be a whole unit and move as one, whereas as a soloist you can take risks within the parameters and the confines of what you're supposed to do. And I really enjoy that. I actually relish the jeopardy and the risk, because when it works, it's an adrenaline rush.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they are different skills, and I think it's important for musicians to have experience of both. And then no matter which one they choose, they want to pursue.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I've observed is that I think with every group that has played this piece of mine that I wrote for Julian, the group sounds better as soon as he is in front of them, because when especially student players hear him playing with them, they have this like, oh, wow, that's a good sound. We should try to sound like that. I guess we're gonna have to sound
role model.
Yeah,
standing
exactly.
Literally right in front of you.
Yeah, so that you hear, how he sounds, and there's I think a conscious effort to try to like go to that level or as close to his level as you can, because he's just like, amazing.
Right.
So even if they can't reach that, I think they try harder. They play better. I think groups just sound better with a good soloist in front of them.
And that just goes back to like the importance of being active listeners, like listening to other genres of music.
Yeah,
and you won't be able
totally.
to play if you can't hear.
Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah. And even as a soloist, like I say, we are all still working towards a common goal. It's a very big collaboration.
Yep.
And
just to make art.
yes, and inevitably every time it's performed and every group you perform with, it's going to be slightly different.
Right.
And that's a really fun process. Like, I think this tonight will be something like the 11th time I've played the concerto since October, which is quite a lot.
Quite a bit, yeah.
And every single performance has been different, for various reasons, all good ones, but for various reasons. And I think it's nice when you go somewhere and you hear something that you haven't heard before, which then influences your playing, and it's just one very large collaboration, and it's a lot of fun.
And we've also he's changed how he plays it, not just with, I think he plays it differently with every ensemble he plays it with, but also because he's played it so many times, he just knows it so well, and so he'll get ideas like in a rehearsal, like, can we try this different thing? And we will try it, and if I'm there and I can, like, just even a couple performances ago he did this, and it was just a brilliant idea, and so now we changed how he's going to play it wherever he plays it. Just like it's a tempo thing that was very different than what I imagined, but it's like better than I imagined, it turns out.
Right.
So things like that, because he owns it and is really hearing it and listening to it every time he's playing it. I think he's learning more about it still without intending to, but it's really cool to like see what happens when one soloist plays the same piece a dozen times with a half dozen orchestra or ensembles. So it's fun for me as a composer to see how that transforms.
The evolution over
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of back to your point originally about classical music or exact music.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge amount of variables, and yes, you have the notes, pre-prescribed notes to play, but after that there's a lot that is very much in the moment and can be very spontaneous. And I think audiences notice that. They pick up on that.
Yeah.
And that's when a performance becomes really exciting for everybody, for us musicians and for the audience as well. So I think some people think, well, playing the same piece over and over again, it gets boring. I've heard that so many times. People think you just carbon copy.
Just the same thing every single time.
No, and I actively look to try different things. Sometimes they work, and other times you think, maybe I won't do that next time. But yeah, there is a huge amount of improvisation, I think, and being in the moment.
Yeah, and it's super exciting for me, too, because I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, like, again, he plays every note. Every note he plays, I wrote, but there are ways that he can, phrase it or, delay a glissando or something or make it even more smeary or, make something suddenly quieter or suddenly there are cadenzas in it where he, I gave him the notes, but he can decide basically how to play them because they're, like, free. Like, he plays those notes in whatever speed he wants by himself. So, it's fun to see like how he will change things, and that's super fun for me as a listener because he's a great musician, so he's not going to try things that are not going to make some kind of sense and seem like an exciting, cool thing to try. Because why not try this?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
We're here, might as well.
Yeah.
So would you say that like the compositional process never really ends? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely move on to the next piece for sure. So for me, it ends for that piece.
Yeah.
But I may take things that I learned from a piece, and now I know how to do something better because I have written another piece that does a different thing, and so that will go into the next piece. I think every piece that a composer writes is kind of like cousins of each other in a way.
One leads to the next.
Yeah, but what you don't want is to write pieces that are like siblings of each other. You don't want to write. You don't want to be able to tell like everyone you're just writing the same piece over and over again. But you want to know that there's like the DNA from the prior piece is your DNA in all your pieces, so they're related and they're just like advancing. But
like a signature, watermark.
Yeah. So and those you can't control. Like I don't know what makes my music sound like my music, but I think it sounds like my music.
Yeah.
So every piece should, but you don't want everything to sound like it's just a variation of the last thing you wrote.
The same thing. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Do either of you have a favorite like setting to write for or a setting to play for?
Not really. No.
Just down for whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I've never worked with wind ensembles as much as now. Yes, there's some great repertoire and great concertos for clarinet and band. But I thought it was about time we added a new one by one of the most eminent composers around. So yeah, I haven't played with wind ensembles as much up until very recently, and I really enjoy it. It's a very unique sound. But at the same time, going back and doing a concerto with a normal orchestra, there's nothing quite like the sound of a full string section.
Yeah, totally.
Or essentially, it's just very different. So I don't prefer one over another, I wouldn't say.
And there's like a very different level of like preparation, I think, between like a professional ensemble and a university ensemble. Like
100%.
An orchestra may have like 2 rehearsals or something, maybe 3, and then they play the concert. And so they don't really know the piece necessarily. They
Definitely
know how
not
to
as much as he does.
Right, they know how to play it, but they don't like. I've had performances with orchestras that had funny things in it, and then after the concert, someone would say, "Oh, it's funny," but they didn't know from the rehearsal process because they're just like basically sight reading it 3 times when they play the concert. So one nice thing with especially wind ensembles based in universities is that they'll spend weeks on the piece
studying it
and really
learning
know
it,
and just like because you're not just and you're probably really rehearsing it and learning stuff about it. So because that's part of the educational process and what it should be doing at a university. So that's a really nice difference between university groups and like professional orchestras or whatever. But there's also the sound of a professional orchestra is just like wow, you hear it's just different no matter how good a university group is. The people who are in an orchestra were like the best person on that instrument from their whole university, and like they're like maybe the only one that got an orchestra job. So like you put them all together and it's just an astonishing
magical,
level of like skill, but you don't get the preparation time and the real like deep knowledge of the piece you're playing, I think, at the professional level usually. So.
Yeah, that's the one big difference, studying something for a little bit longer versus just reading it.
Yeah.
Get to actually experience the music a lot more.
Well, and sometimes I think I've noticed it, especially when working with youth orchestras and it's a different, I don't know, level of, there's a different feeling, different. I wouldn't necessarily say different level of enthusiasm, but you know, they're very young, they're very eager, they're very and they really try very, very hard.
Yeah.
And you can really feel that, and it's a really nice, supportive place to be in.
Yeah, like the group here, I think, is just, you know, they're so excited to be playing it and playing with Julian. And it's been, like, last night for rehearsal was really fun. You know, they're just, like, they're totally keyed up. So, you know, that kind of, like, woo, we're going to do a show is a different thing than you find outside
In
of
like
this.
a professional orchestra where they're like, all right, let's do a show.
Yeah. It's showtime rather than, woo, showtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Third
That's
one this week.
beautiful.
Yeah.
No, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. I really appreciate your point of views. We are out of time, and I just wanted to thank you both for being here and
thanks. Thank
coming and speaking with me on my show today. It's been a real pleasure, and really excited for the show tonight.
Tonight at 7 o'clock,
gonna
right?
be
I think it's at
awesome.
7 o'clock.
I
Yeah,
believe
7
so.
o'clock.
It is now.
Well, now, now we're doing it at 7.
Publicly stated
Yes.
7
Yeah.
o'clock. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Really
Thanks for having
appreciate it. This was Blue Note Radio Hour here on UIC Radio, where music and culture, say it with me, ignite. Have a good one, everyone. Peace. Come to the show tonight.